Hello and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
Boom, 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 boom. Yes. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Find Your Freedom. Now, before we jump into, our next guest here, our next friend here, we put together this freedom kit just for you because we know that you want to find your freedom and we want to make sure that we help you with that. Now, it's easily downloadable. All you have to do is go to www.findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. That's right. findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. Now, this next guest that we have on is a real rock star. All right. She's an Airbnb investor. She has a background as being a registered nurse. She's a co-founder of one of the fastest growing groups that I'm aware of, short-term STR Nations. And, we're going to get into her fantastic story on how she left her job in 9 months for dealing with Airbnb. So I can't wait. So with that being said, if you could all help me bring Stephanie in. Stephanie, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks, Lenny. I'm super happy to be here. Thanks, Omid. Very excited.
Fantastic. So before we jump into this amazingness of yours, right, can you just give the listeners a little background on yourself?
Sure. So I'm a registered nurse turned real estate investor, entrepreneur. Left the hospital during the pandemic. Pretty much realized that this wasn't going to be for me for the next, 30 plus years. So dove really deep into side hustles. I was going to open actually my own e-commerce business, but then found real estate through YouTube videos, and the rest was history from there. So to me now, though, it's crazy because if you asked me like 5 years ago if I would be in real estate, investing and all this stuff, I would be like, no, I'm going to stay in the hospital because there's just no way. So, but now it's a complete different version of who I am now.
I mean, so for me, it's, hearing somebody like leaving such a stable job where you go through all this, training and you go through all the certifications. What did people say? Because I think that's something scary. Like most people just traditionally want to do the safe thing and stay within like the field that they've like studied for. And, so what did people say? And what's your thoughts on that and how you decided to just kind of make the move?
So I actually didn't tell anybody for the longest time that I worked with or anything like that. I kind of just made my move. I actually took a work from home job as a nurse and then was like, all right, so let me get some of my sanity back so that I could actually figure out what all this real estate stuff was. But then when I started sharing it with people, I noticed a difference between me sharing it with old coworkers and old healthcare workers like that versus telling new people and then not telling them what my background was. And people were just, they were like semi-supportive, like passively supportive. They're like, okay, well, let us know when you're going to come back. And part of me was like, that hurts a little bit, but you'll wait, you'll see. And so now when I come back, it's a whole different story. And people are, because they see that success, they're a little bit more like curious now because it's like you're doing it. You're really doing it. And there's like a pot of people that are just like, go get it. Go leave us. Like, break the mold.
That's awesome. I love that. So before we jump into, getting, some facts here on how you did it, so quickly and left your job, one of the things you mentioned was you said you had some side hustles. So that means that something was brewing inside of you. I guess tell us a little bit about that. Like, tell us a little bit about your journey, with the side hustles and what was brewing inside of you did you know that you was going to be an entrepreneur at the end of the day?
Yeah, I always knew there was something outside of the hospital. It's like a fishbowl effect. So you kind of think like it's them and then us over here. So what I started to do during the pandemic, my boyfriend and I, just for fun, but then we knew it was going to turn into something, was we just started basically driving for Instacart and Uber and going to every single house, every single like neighborhood that we could find, deliver groceries, deliver food, and basically do a little bit of like driving for dollars while making some money outside of our full-time jobs and on the weekends, just because there's nothing to do. And that was such a big thing during the pandemic. Everybody was ordering. So it was actually pretty good. I think I made like 2,000 additional income in July during the pandemic just from
Wow.
doing like driving for DoorDash and and Instacart.
No, I think I love that. I think it's as you go into a field, I think a lot of people decide, hey, it makes good money, but they're miserable, but they're so tied to the money. And right away were like, hey, this is probably not a good fit. This is probably a good time for me to start looking for other, avenues of income and doing what you got to do to kind of, make it work. So now you're in real estate. So why short-term rentals versus anything else?
That's a good question. And when I first wanted to do short term rentals, the reason why was because I love traveling and I love going places. And I will say part of the novelty of it, it interested me. You know, nobody wants to go see their long term rentals or anything like that, but people will be happy to go vacation. So it just, and the design of it, even the hosting side, it's very similar to nursing. It's like all my guests are like patients. See, I don't even know the difference anymore. The check in check out is like admission and discharge, so I felt like it was just a good fit. But I was told not to do short term rentals when I first started. I was actually talked out of it, especially being from California. It's not the friendliest state for short term rentals. So we were going to do wholesaling, mobile home flipping, and then we came right back around to short term rentals. So I knew it could work and people were successful. So for me, I was just like, I'm going to make it happen regardless. I'll be that example if I have to be in my community. So, and then I met friends like you guys.
Awesome. I love that. I love when you can sit there and say my skills here are transferable, right? And your nursing skills and the way that you look at it and the way that you look at, people checking in, checking out is like admitting and discharging, through a hospital. That's super cool. So let's still talk about this short-term rental. So I guess let us know like your first short-term rental, your second, your third, like were you arbitraging? Were you co-host? Are you managing yourself? Like what was your first steps on your first short-term run?
So my first one, it was actually an arbitrage, but it wasn't. I wasn't planning on it to be an arbitrage. I was actually looking to buy, and I ended up getting my realtor's license. I thought it was like the logical thing to do to invest in real estate. So I had the opportunity to sell my family's house, and I was like, "Well, why are you selling?" And they told me, "Well, our long-term rental tenants are bad. We don't like them. They're not paying on time." And then I got the idea. I was like, I know I like watched this in a YouTube video, so I'm going to try it. I was like, what if I'm become your tenant? I'll give you the rent you're looking for, and whether or not I make money, you'll get your rent, but I get to sublease and put on Airbnb, and it'll be kept immaculate. And they said yes. So my first deal ended up being an arbitrage 30 minutes from me. When I was actually like looking to buy a short-term rental just anywhere. And from that became like my proof of concept. It was nice because I realized like one of the big mistakes people make is that they get too involved into the business. So like after each turn, I was the inspector, my boyfriend, we checked on our cleaner, and then we're like, we can't do this all the time and then working. So that's when we started to treat it like it was far, far away and just did everything by phone instead of just driving there after every little thing. And then before we knew it, like a month in, we were like, okay, it's done. We're doing this for reals. We're going to put the money in. And so then we met somebody, actually, Alex. He was doing it out of state, and that's what we were looking to do. So we found an example of someone that was being successful with it, and we were already on that path. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to make it work. And so it turned into our second deal was one that we bought together in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. And then like literally a month later after we closed, we were looking in Tennessee, but then we were like, let's try to look at a different market instead. So we ended up in Crystal Beach, Texas, and bought our third one there. So literally within like about 4 months or so from start to finish, we had three at that point. So that kind of covers the first three rentals.
Wow. I mean, I think that's super impressive when you think about um, not knowing anything to going straight into an arbitrage and just kind of getting the proof of concept to jumping into another market out of state, which most people are afraid to do, and then going to a completely different state and doing it again. Um, I guess what are like the learning lessons, just like going through that journey? Because it definitely looks like, when you first started, you're, kind of learning about like not working in the business and on the business, and then like you're slowly starting to scale. So what are like some teachables as you're going through this process?
A couple of things come to mind, and that's standardizing it. So even though you're in different markets, the flow of what you need to do before and after a turn is the same. And we also started making all of our equipment the same across the board too, so that now we're getting more streamlined. So systematizing every aspect of it and then getting it to a point where now you can teach it to somebody else so that you're not having to be the one to do it all the time. um, those were the lessons we started realizing, because being in three different time zones and then still having a full-time job and running those, and then every market's so nuanced, I'm like, we gotta make this a little bit more more of the same thing. um, so that's like the big thing, was we realized the importance of systematizing things like sooner than later, and then that way scaling isn't as scary because you already know what to do, even if it is in a different market.
No, that's great. And the way that you viewing that is great. And we now totally understand why you're so successful, right? Like, all those things you're mentioning, make sense. But, it's something that you mentioned. You said, hey, obviously you got your first place, with the help of your parents, right? You became the renter there and start arbitraging it there. But then you said you went out and you said, hey, we need to invest, across the country somewhere, and you found someone, Alex Appio, right? Where he was doing it. How important is it for, before you kind of jump out there, to kind of get a mentor to help you, through the way?
I think it's super important because at the end of the day, you realize, well, if this person can do it successfully, why not me? And we were already looking out of state anyways, and we couldn't find anybody within our network. It was a little bit smaller at the time. And to be able to know that, okay, someone is actually successful, because we saw so many failure stories, which is why we got talked out of it in the first place. So the mentorship part, and it wasn't really more of a mentor, it was just like a friend. It was just like, hey, question for you, if this happened, like, what would you do about this like specific scenario? Like, oh, someone like snuck in a pet or something like that, and then you realize, well, what can you do? So not much, right? But finding that person or a friend, I'd say finding your neighbor, because what I've come to learn, in every single market I go to, I will find a neighbor in that market. And surprisingly, in my Crystal Beach property, I found my neighbor through social media. She posted a photo in some short-term rental group, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm right next door to you. And she closed a couple months prior. So every time we visit, we both look out for each other's houses. So it's crazy. It's like your virtual neighbors. So I learned to find virtual neighbors in every market that I go to.
I love the virtual neighbor concept. I think that's awesome because I think there's a sense of community, and like you said, people are looking out for each other, and also like touching on that mentor piece. It's whether Alex Sabio, admits it or not, he's mentored so many people like unofficially, and he's had he had that proof of concept, and he inspired me to go into the Smokies, and so it's crazy how that's like a butterfly effect, and how it's impacted so many other people that have even seen your journey, and then people you've impacted, and I really enjoy that. So all right, so let's fast forward. So now, when do you decide, hey, I want to do this like group? Because I think for a lot of people, they get into these, they compare themselves and they say, hey, there's this I don't know, Bill Faith's group, and it's 10,000 people or 50,000 people, and and then you got to start from scratch. And so, what gave you the inspiration to do it? And then, and how did you get started with that?
So it's kind of cool with S-Tier Nation because it started with a bunch of people that were in the Smokies already, like virtual neighbors, but we realized we're actually somewhat physically close to and where we actually live. So we wanted to meet up with other just other Smokies investors in person. And so the first meetup, it was in October, almost a year and a half ago, actually. And that's where I met Patrick. And it's cool because at that time we just closed on our first we were just closing around our first cabin, if we already did or not. And it was like, well, this was the first in-person meetup that I've ever been to where it was so short-term rental centric and it was like local enough. I was like, we have to keep this going because there's plenty of other people that are probably in the same boat as me, which is I don't really know anyone that does short-term rentals that I could actually just like see in person, yet our properties are far away from us. So we decided let's meet up again at this time at this place. And I started inviting people that I knew that were interested in short-term rentals to come. Hey, you can talk to me, but you can talk to so many other people, and there's somebody that's going to resonate better with you, if not me too. And so then before we knew it, come January, we're like, let's make this official and like make ourselves a name. We have all these opportunities with vendors that we already work with and we believe in their product because it helps us run our rentals. And it kind of took a life from its own because the more it's like we kept pumping each other up, and everybody that we met, it was like an accountability group, but like even better. So we put it on Facebook because being out of state, we realized there were plenty of other owners in other states that had the same questions that we did. And so building that community, it was a no-brainer, to be honest. But I mean, it wasn't, it took a life of its own. And then we ended up throwing a conference, which blew on, even for us, I think we were like, wow, we actually did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
A
now
year
it's
later.
like, you're literally within like about a year. We decided, well, let's just do this big because we knew that there was enough there's not enough short-term rental like specific groups is what I've kind of seen. The funny part about this is that the overlap is there. Like we all share very similar friends and contacts, and the overlap from group to group it blows my mind because we honestly should just make one mega community of short-term rental investors.
Yeah.
But that's just what ended up happening. And so the expectation now is people are like, so when's the next one? And I'm like, oh, we better keep it going because now people expect it. But it's great because it's made me better. It's made me more accountable. And I think having somebody to relate to when it comes to the trials of, this is not easy stuff. We make it look easy. We make it look fun, but it can be really stressful. So having like a good, like someone that's not going to judge you about it. Cause I realize when I talk to other people that don't quite know it, man, it hurts a little, it hurts a little bit.
That's cool. And I love that, because honestly, you and Patrick, both of you saw opportunity for just education, and everybody was there for the same thing, right? Just like you said, no judgment zone. Everybody just here to learn really the inside, the under the cover stuff, I like to call it, because we don't talk about that on social media, right? We don't talk about how I have I have a guest who flooded the sink with all types of food, and all the water just came splashing over. Like these are the things that don't get publicized, but they get publicized at these events. But you also get the solution, which is more important, on how to address those situations. So I really love that. So you have been revving up on social media, I've noticed, with some of your reels and some of your TikToks, and personally I'm enjoying it. So what are some of the things that's inspiring you to create those type of reels in the social media clips?
You know what I found is that people are watching, and whether they actually say it or not, they are watching. And I think what made me start doing it was in my local community out in the Inland Empire. I I kind of became one of the short-term rental people just because I didn't have that example, like I mentioned before. So um, I showed it just for a little bit of entertainment. It was fun for me too. And next thing you know, people are like, "Oh, I really liked your video. I want to see more." And because I liked doing it so much, and it kind of like in a stressful situation, especially this year, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be stressful when you can do it with other people. You're not by yourself. And so by being on social media and kind of showing people the highs and even there's going to be some lows in there too, of course. It's not as scary and it can be fun. And it's funner when you're able to do it and share it with other people. I realized kind of keeping it to myself. I don't like it. I want other people to know about it too because it could change their lives, and that's what I hope.
I think you have one where you have like a drill and you're dancing, and then there's like transitions. Like that's one I like. I forgot which one that one was, but that was yeah. But those are fun. Yeah. So I agree. So I guess so somebody is they've got their first short-term rental, so they're like they got confidence now. They're building their confidence. Okay, I think I got a hang of this, but they have no capital. What's your thoughts on like co-hosting and like transitioning in that part of the business?
I think it's a natural progression once you actually start to get the hang of things. People notice and they're like, "Well, you're doing it and you're doing it well because that's your lifeblood now. So why don't you do mine? Because I don't have time." So I've co-hosted and it's good. Actually, it's not bad. I do think just like any new short-term rental, even in your own portfolio, there's a learning curve, and then there's a period of time that you're getting to know the market, the house, and once you get into the swing of things, it's like running your own rental at that point. So I think it's a great way to continue to scale in different ways. Plus, you're building relationships with both your homeowners, and you get to also show other people as well, like, hey, I can be a resource for you, a go-to person, whether I'm actually going to run your short-term rental for you. There's an overlap. All the operations are the same. So this just the method of how you acquire it's different. And I think most like almost every short-term rental operator I've met, it's like that seems to be either they're pivoting towards it or at least being open to it, or they're going full force into it.
That's great. That's great. That's great. So let me ask you. So I keep hearing you mention a couple times. You and your boyfriend. You and your boyfriend. So it sounds like you two joined together to build the empire that you got going on here. So how did you work together to delegate different responsibilities?
So great question. So Robert is the boyfriend, and yeah,
She has a
Shout out to
name.
Robert. Robert, what's up, my brother? We need to have you on the show, Robert. So come on, we need to have you on.
Robert is a little quieter than me, but he's definitely there. So the way we kind of divide it, and it's nice because we both have very different strengths, and I think that helps a lot. I'm definitely more of the organizer. The best way I put it is like there's a bunch of tabs open in my brain, and like I can tell which one's open and which one needs to be open and closed. Um, he is an aircraft mechanic by trade, so whenever it comes to fixing things, he kind of takes the lead on that. He does a lot more of the back end stuff, so he makes sure that the books are good, the financials are flowing as they should be. He'll cover guest communications as well, and I'll probably do a little bit more on the vendor side. We have a virtual assistant now, so we both kind of we'll take turns. We kind of started doing it by shifts for a little while, where I got the morning shift and he got the afternoon shift. But now we're starting to kind of rehash our lanes to see what better suits like our time and stuff like that. So the good news is I typically like to do some of the stuff that he doesn't like to do. So starting with strengths and weaknesses, but then what do you actually like and don't like? And that's how we ended up delegating to each other what to do.
So I like that concept of like, figuring out everybody's strengths, stick to what you're good at. And then I also heard the virtual assistant. So maybe talk on that a little bit, because I think a lot of operators, they get their first, they're running their first short-term rental, and then they're kind of teetering on when is the right time? How should I leverage? How much should I be spending? So maybe you can kind of walk through like the whole VA process, because I think that seems to be more emerging for people to kind of leverage, like, you know, somebody to do tasks that, maybe they don't want to do.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish I started sooner with a virtual assistant. I was so stubborn about it. And I had two at one point, and then I kind of leaned out a little bit more on it. So now I have just one. But going through the virtual assistant process, one thing I realized is that you have to hire for the role and not the task. You really want a thinker and not just a doer. What I mean by that is there's a critical thinking component. And the funny part I find is hosting isn't rocket science. A lot of the stuff, it just makes sense for people who, they live in their own houses. Like, well, what would you do if the TV doesn't work? you know?
Yeah.
And so, but finding a virtual assistant that has the makings of customer service, I found is way more important than finding a virtual assistant with property management experience, because all that can be taught. But if they have the right mindset, so asking, instead of, I ask scenario based questions for my virtual assistants, and it's actually something similar that we do in nursing, because it's how do you think? That's what you want to really find out. And so a good question I asked, like, it's one I ask every single virtual assistant I'll interview is, what do you think you should do if a guest comes to the house and it has been cleaned, but it hasn't been cleaned to their satisfaction? What do you think is the right move to do? Like, what do you think you should do in that situation? And that answer alone will tell me whether or not, like, this person will get it and do well, versus if they don't give that great of an answer. And then it's like, okay, that we're going to have a little bit more work to do if we went with a virtual assistant that has that type of mindset for that question. So
I think that that's great. I really do. Because you're providing more of a scenario that's occurring, and you're saying, I'm not here with you. How are you going to handle this scenario? And understanding, even if they get it wrong, just understanding the thought process behind it, you can sit there and say, hey, I can work on it with this individual. So dealing with VAs, right? So you got one, right? You said you had two, but you dial back to one. How much time up front are you spending, with your VAs to get them to where you need them to be for your business?
we do a ramp. It's kind of how we've structured our training. So it lasts about 2 to 3 weeks is what we found is what's necessary. So we'll start them with just one thing, which is just guest communications. So week one, all you need to do is talk to guests. Don't worry about the vendors. Don't worry about this. Just, I want you to talk to just guests, and inquiries and so forth. And then by week two, it's like, okay, now I'm going to start introducing to you this vendor in this market at this property. And being in different markets is probably the trickiest part, because each vendor works so differently. So slowly introducing a vendor at a time versus everybody all at once, I found was the better way to teach somebody how to do it successfully. But it's once they get the hang of it, like, I love my virtual assistant. I hope she stays with me forever. But once she kind of got to week three, like, she was ready to just go after it. But it took like one scoop at a time, instead of, here, eat the whole ice cream and don't let it melt, you know?
No, I love that. I think like the doing it in tiers and kind of developing them, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I just hired somebody and they're supposed to figure it out. But maybe, so how do you lay out like even expectations, and even the form of communication? Is there like some sort of software program you use to kind of facilitate that communication and or expectations?
Yeah. So the stack that we use with our virtual assistants is Asana when it comes to assigning, like, this is what, so we kind of broke it down to, what do you do after every checkout? So we standardized every step in a checklist form, but we have it communicated on Asana. So she'll check it off and then it reoccurs during the next turn. We also use, I've used Loom videos to where I will record how to do a specific task that may or may not happen very often, but it's an important one to know. So Loom videos was helpful. We always do our meetings on Google Meet, and WhatsApp is what we primarily use just for quick text communication.
Excellent. So I'm loving this. You got task management system assignment that you're using. You're creating standard operating procedures, creating videos for where scenarios so they can handle those. So, like, what hours do you have them working? Like, what hours you found out that's like a prime time, hours for them to, be successful at helping out with the business?
When I had two virtual assistants, we had them work from four. I'll put this on Eastern Standard Time. So it was 4 a.m. to um, it was 2 p.m. And then we had the 2 p.m.er go until about around midnight ish or so. But now that we've dialed it back to 1, and that was 6 days a week, we have her go from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week, and we have her off on Tuesdays. So
Mm.
it's been quite nice because we've come to find we want somebody there right before checkout. Just because questions, I've always learned that
Yeah.
guests always have those like remainder questions. And being from the West Coast, there were times where I like would miss them, right? Just because I'm still sleeping at that point. So it was nice having somebody finally like, oh, good, you can be Eastern Standard Time because most of our properties are there. And then by 8 p.m., I noticed like anything that happens after that point is either going to be like a new reservation or somebody can't get in because they're super late. But at that point we don't mind because we're on the West Coast, so we're still awake by midnight. Comes around on the East Coast, so that's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week is what we have her do. And it's like an on-call thing, so it's not like she's actually working for the full 12 hours. It's her agenda is make sure that the check-in and then check-out is solid and that cleaners are showing up when they're supposed to, and then if a guest has a question, please answer what their question is.
I love that. I think that's leveraging a VA. I think people should definitely do that sooner than later when they're running their business, and that frees up their time and they can do other things. And I saw one of your stories recently that you're making like 20 offers, and so walk us through that. Like, what are you doing today? Like, what does that look like as far as Stephanie in March?
So right now we're looking to acquire a new property in the next 30 days. So, but we're looking to do this creatively. So I've been looking and analyzing a lot of subject to deals out of state in Florida, and Texas as well to see if the numbers work. And so Robert and myself been doing a lot of agent outreach and also seller outreaches to acquire the existing mortgage versus having to get a new loan, and with the interest rates being so high. So that's kind of our new thing right now is we're looking to acquire more short-term rentals, add a midterm rental to the mix, and yeah, hopefully we'll lock one in the next 30 days. So volume is key, so we're just going ham on,
That's
on
great.
putting out offers.
Hey, Stephanie, for the listeners, can you just give just the just a brief of what subject to is?
Oh, sure. So, long story short, the buyer comes and takes over the existing mortgage for the seller and makes payments on their behalf. Title transfers to the buyer, but the loan stays on the seller's name, and it actually helps their credit a lot. But that's what subject to is. So it's not an
Awesome.
assumption; it's just a taking over of the payments.
Gotcha. Just let me ask you. So, like, what are you doing now? Now that you have this business up and running, like, um, are you freeing your time? Are you traveling? Are you like, what else are you doing with your time these days?
So we were going to do some traveling in the summertime, but we've kind of broken up our year in quarters. So quarter 1 and quarter 2, we're just going to work on scaling and acquiring. And then by quarter 3, quarter 4, our hope and our goal is to kind of relax a little bit. So we're going to basically put our heads down and just get to work for the next 2 quarters, and hopefully we'll acquire, if we can acquire at least 4 more properties this year, we're pretty happy with that.
No, I love that. I think I love the whole like acquisition sort of strategy, like starting it off like aggressive, and then I guess is there something like within those markets that you feel like there's an opportunity, like the Texas to Florida, like what specifically like are like potential sellers like underwater? Um, or is there like they're having difficulty selling? Like, what's, I guess, prompted your analysis into those markets?
For those markets specifically, I'm finding, well, because it's funny, you're looking at it both still from a short-term rentals perspective on who's going to go visit there, your
Yeah.
guest avatar. So those two states right now are just like booming with visitation in general. But as far as actually the sellers and being more amenable to a deal like that, it's both. So yes, for them being a little bit underwater but them needing to sell. And if they want the price point that they're wanting, and there's a lot of buyers right now that aren't qualifying. So I've talked to a couple of agents where it's like, this is the third time we're going under escrow. And I'm like,
Wow.
well,
Yeah.
this might actually be a good solution for you and your seller then, because it's different. So that's why I'm kind of going with those two markets, because I'm finding they're just more amenable to that than over here.
So I
That's
guess like, do you think there's like they're more open to it now in those type of markets, or in those markets, because of like the circumstances that the sellers are in?
Yeah, and also with how just interest rates being so high,
mm,
a lot of sellers are having to help with the closing cost, or they'll have to give credits for a interest rate buy down. So this is actually allowing them to not have to worry about that. All they have to do is agree to the terms, and they can still get the price point they want, and they're not having to come out of pocket just to help the buyer close if they do this method.
gotcha. Now, under these subject twos, do you are you just basically taking that over? Do you have to give them like some type of down payment money? Like, can they talk through those points if you can?
Sure. It depends on what they have in terms of equity. So there's like two parts to this. There's the actual mortgage takeover, but if they have equity still in the house, then how do they get those payments? They'll get it through a down payment, and that's just whatever is agreed upon between the buyer and the seller, and then they will seller finance the remainder of that equity portion outside of the down payment. So you're making monthly payments that make sense to you, but then it helps them to where they don't have to pay capital gains tax all up front. It's actually over time. And then some people, they don't need the money all up front, but they'll know that they're going to get more at the very end. People are like, I could do that. But it really depends on the seller situation. What they're looking to do after they sell the house is what we're finding.
Oh no, that's great. That's awesome. That seller two financing, is becoming very popular now. Due to uh these interest rates just going out the
Pace
roof,
Morby.
right? You know,
Mhm. Oh yeah,
you know,
but it's a great strategy right now because it is a win-win for both the seller and the buyer too.
yeah, absolutely. And so, just get a little more on the structure of those W twos again. So like when you put the down payment on, are they like taking that money and pocketing it right now, or do it go to escrow or something? Or
You still go through like an escrow process, but that portion goes to them, similar to how you would get paid. They would get paid out on their equity if during a normal bank transaction. The bank is the one to pay them out, but instead you're doing it yourself. So they're not getting as upfront, like they're not getting their full payout upfront, but they're still getting a down payment of sorts. But it goes just from the buyer directly to them. But an escrow company still oversees everything.
gotcha.
Oh, that's cool. No, I think it's become like a super, popular thing. And, I know a lot of people are getting into it. And, I love hearing those great stories where it's a win-win. So I think that's great, because it's, again, it's like problem solving, and, you finding a solution to somebody else's problem, and then, everybody wins. So that's super awesome. So I guess, maybe you can tell us, what does Find Your Freedom mean to you?
For me, it's all about living a life by your design. It's become my motto. That was the whole reason why I decided to go into real estate and entrepreneurship, because I finally felt that sense of freedom in being able to craft my life around what I find, brings me joy. So living a life on your terms by your design is what finding your freedom means to me.
I love that. I really do. Living life by your design. That is great, 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 Stephanie. Thank you. So, Stephanie, how can people find you? How can people, one, get to see all these cool reels and TikTok videos? Because they're cool. I'm letting you know they are really cool that you're knocking out. But how can people get in contact with you?
Oh, thanks, Lenny. I'm glad. I love the feedback. It makes me like, all right, I got to be more creative now. People want the dancing. I got to bring some dancing into these serious real estate videos.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is just my name, Stephanie Figueros. And I also have a YouTube channel that I'm growing as well. So you can find me on YouTube. And that has a little bit more educational content. But for the funner stuff, Instagram and Facebook Reels is where you'll find me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, Stephanie, we come to this end of the show, right? And at the end of the show, we all get together and we do this big boom, right? So how it's going to work is I'm going to count to 3, and in a uniform manner, all of us going to say boom. And our objective here is to rock some speakers, to bust some air drums. So you let me know if you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. For all the people who's listening, they can't see it. Stephanie is sitting up right now. She's pumping in all the air in her lungs to sit there and kill you guys. So turn your radio down now. And I'm telling you. All right. So, all right, let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Boom!
Boom!
Awesome, 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 awesome. Check this out, man. We just had a rock star on. Remember, we do friends here. We don't do guests. All right. So check Stephanie out. She got some of the coolest, I'm telling you, some of the coolest reels that you can even check out. She also is knowledgeable and sitting here and spitting so much game to so many people. And also, if you can, check out her group, man. STR Nation is growing big, is growing quick. They're doing a lot of education there. Now, here at Find Your Freedom, we got to hook you up. We got to sit here and give you some type of freedom kit so you can sit here and find your freedom. So we have an easily downloadable item for you. Just go to www.findyourfreedom.rei/freedom kit. Once again, go to findyourfreedom.rei.com/freedom kit. Please, if you can, listen to this episode. Give us an honest 5-star review, because that's the way that we can continue to bring rock stars on like Stephanie, so you can sit here and learn more and more and more so you can find your freedom. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share this with your aunt, uncle, brother, sister, mother, girlfriend, boyfriend, all your coworkers, the ones you like, the ones you don't like. Just take the link and share it with everybody in your email contact. All right. So with that being said, until the next episode of Find Your Freedom, talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.